Good evening, dear friends. I wish you all a comfortable summer. If you are on vacation, enjoy it properly. If you are just getting ready for it, enjoy it properly. According to the Russian research agency Reuters, 81% of Slovaks and Slovenes do not trust Slovak media. The remaining 19% are probably the most notorious and radical voters of the opposition, who would not be able to survive without massive media anti-Slovak and anti-government propaganda, full of lies and irrelevant accusations. It is funny to observe the inability of the media to bring something interesting in the summer season. I do not want to comment on important events, because the ruling coalition and the government play a decisive role in them. Therefore, the quality of media coverage of the first days of the holidays reminds me of the result of one study, in which scientists found out, I'm kidding a little, that whoever smells fingers in the morning, his ass sniffs it at night. Let me comment on a few important events in today's regular coverage. I returned to Devon, where on July 5, at the celebrations of Saint Cyril and the Method Patriarchal, I do not break the culture of peace, which Slovakia must not only conquer, but also protect, and which must be considered as one of the basic reasons for our future stated in the strategic document of the Vision of Slovakia by 2040. We also expressed this unbreakable culture of peace and sovereign Slovak foreign policy at the NATO summit in Ankara this week. The summit was covered with a difficult-to-understand bow to the American president's spirit, and a conflict between the United States and Spain. For me, it is essential that more NATO member states expressed interest in entering into a dialogue with Russia, which I welcome and support for a long time. Even though at the end of the summit there was a mention of another 70 billion in military aid to Ukraine, Slovakia had already clearly declared its sovereign peace stance before the summit. After a telephone conversation with NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, we exchanged letters last Thursday and confirmed to each other that Slovakia would not participate in such military financial aid to Ukraine. We did the same with the 90 billion in military aid, this time from the European level. We are for cooperation, for dialogue, for humanitarian aid. However, we are not for war. Dear friends, notice how quietly Slovak media were buzzing about our sovereign stance, as usual. Once again, I will refer to Vienna, because I spoke about it, also about the inevitability of breaking the crisis of duality and truth as an inalienable value of Slovakia on the road to our future. In this regard, I expressed my conviction that tolerance and mutual respect cannot be considered a sign of weakness. In this spirit, we are also following the Festival of Political Songs of Peace in Trenčín. We tolerate that a political, anti-government festival was formed from a music festival, full of various, divided guests and performers. It is worth mentioning that the organizer of this festival, Mr. Kacak, was hit by a legally acquitted public prosecutor, formerly the president of the Slovak press, a high state award. Well, it certainly wasn't for good music. However, even with our broad tolerance, we must be careful in connection with the teleconference of the leader of the Georgian National Leagues, Mamulasvi Lim, who spoke to the delegates of the Festival of Political Songs in Trenčín. It is known that this man took part in the Maidan in Kyiv, in an attempt to overthrow the legitimate Georgian government, for which he was also prosecuted. In 2016, the Georgian legions became part of the Ukrainian army and were headed by intelligence from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. After the last parliamentary elections, this man also visited Slovakia. There are obvious contacts with the organizers of several anti-government protests and contacts with Simeček Sr. or other similar anti-government and anti-Slovak representatives of the Slovak opposition. Although the teleconference was supposed to take place at his participation, it was attended by several non-governmental organizations. What kind of man is he supposed to give a lecture at a festival that stands for music and politics? I want to express my belief that all relevant bodies appreciate this situation as a return of possible security risks for Slovakia. Dear friends, enough information has been eliminated against Slovak and anti-government media that the European Commission has stopped Slovak activity in the matter of double oil prices, which we introduced to protect Slovak citizens from the drastic depreciation of coal mines and their lack, as a result of their purchase by foreigners. The measures were implemented in March of this year and lasted 60 days. Certainly also thanks to it and other security measures of the current government, in cooperation with the Slovnaft refinery, Slovakia has now been going through a deep oil crisis with one of the lowest CNP levels in Europe. I believe that the pressure on the resumption of the management of the oil industry has also helped. What happened in March of the media posing cry, how the European Commission condemns us and imposes high fines on us and similar nonsense. After fulfilling the purpose of the decision on the double prices, we cancelled it. Therefore, the European Commission has no further reason to act, and any action against the Slovak Republic in this context has stopped. The whole story is again a proof of the self-aware approach of the government, on the one hand respecting our membership in the European Union, on the other hand protecting our national and national state interests. And in the media and in the opposition councils it is again as quiet as in a church. For this, with a few concrete pillars of 60 by 60 centimeters, which the construction company badly built in the new military hospital Prešov, they made Bengal as a means of entertainment. No one from the opposition and its media will be torn apart, not even when confirming the extremely low level of unemployment in Slovakia, which is moving below 4%. But this is how unemployment should develop even in 2027, when we expect higher economic growth. Anyone in Slovakia who wants to work will find a job. On the contrary, we have more than 130,000 free jobs and companies operating in Slovakia have to look after their employees abroad. The question is, where are those mass abandons, that huge impact of unemployment, about which the opposition and the media, i.e. practically all mainstream media, are so happy to shout? The fact that they are next to each other like food does not bother them at all. The main thing is that they shout loudly and create a false image of the Slovak spirit. The worse, the better. Let's remember the basic opposition strategy well, that the task of the opposition is to harm. And they do it in the end. The German giant Volkswagen openly admits huge economic problems and discusses serious, painful measures. Some Slovak media did not hesitate and have already asked the question, how many employees will come to work after the Volkswagen in Bratislava? The common sense does not believe it. But that is the reason why the media do not believe 81% of Slovaks and Slovenes. Dear friends, this week we witnessed another tasteless spectacle about whether Slovakia should have or should not have wind farms. People hate each other, as usual. They kick each other out of the open door. I do not know how many times I have to publicly announce this. The government I lead has no interest in the production of electricity from the wind. We only have a duty to leave the renewal plan, to which the previous government committed itself during the creation of this document, and that is to prepare an assessment of the situation in Slovakia. Otherwise, we face a fine for not fulfilling the commitment of the renewal plan worth several hundred million euros. I have to find out at the moment to what extent the lobbyists and wind turbines manufacturers blow wind to Slovakia, so that after the commitment of the previous government, they could see another wave in Slovakia. And is it not also about politically motivated steps to start other political forces in Slovakia against the government? So, once again, no wind farms for the current government. And I would like to remind the others that even if the new government of Bezmru, after the elections in 2027, had an interest in changing this sovereign position of the current government, the cities and villages in which nothing will happen will have everything in their hands. In the energy sector, I devote all my attention to nuclear power plants. We are at the top of the world in terms of electricity produced from nuclear power plants. We have excellent experience. The assessment of the safety of our reactors is at a high level. Just a few days ago, we witnessed the load-bearing of nuclear fuel to the fourth block in Mochovce, and it is a huge success of Slovak power plants. However, 2/3 of Slovak power plants were privatized by the government of Mikola Zurand, a member of the Italian company Enel. The Italians, as a gift, also got a water power plant in Absakov, which we acquired by a fair deal to the 100% ownership of the state. The ambition of the sovereign government should be the establishment of a new structure of electricity production on 100% state ownership, which during the crisis gives the state a lot of useful tools. That is why there must be a new nuclear power plant, planned for Jaslovska Bohunica, fully in the hands of the state. This is the reason why we need to quickly buy half of the Slovak Czech company JEZ from the Czech company EZ, which was established several years ago precisely for the purpose of the establishment of a new nuclear power plant in Jaslovska Bohunica. However, the Ministry of Economy has already received 2 terms for the fulfillment of this task, and I will not express my agreement with further extension of the terms. The mutual settlement with the Czech co-owner must take place in a short time and on the basis of the scientific judgment of a renowned foreign auditing company, so that we can proceed with the installation of a modern 1,200 megawatts reactor. Dear friends, in conclusion, I would like to express my desire that no one will have the interest or desire to harm the majestic oak of Hruzovany, which is becoming one of the most famous trees in Slovakia. This oak is the embodiment of good and safety. I was quite uncertain when the journalists from DNI or other anti-government and anti-Slovak media were revolving around it, which are the embodiment of evil and hatred. I hope that the beloved oak of Hruzovany has not been harmed in any way and that they give it peace and that it will follow us and provide us with protection for the next many years. Have a nice weekend and summer, dear friends.